Good afternoon. Welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. And as we sit on our hands and wait to see if Arkansas is satisfied, Arkansas men's basketball satisfied with its current 10 deep or does maybe make additions, let's talk about what I wanted to do today is really deep dive into the 10 and how I see the minutes, starting roles, rotations, and the players that have all league potential. We've talked about some of this spread out over some of these segments, but we're going to kind of concentrate everything into one. So we're not convinced that Arkansas is not going to add any more. I'm on the record as saying that lately. I don't believe Arkansas is just going to stand pat at these 10. I don't know how many more the Razorbacks would add, one or two more. Probably seems, like a cap out on it. But we'll just see about that. But based on the 10, this is really interesting to me how I came out on this. When I really looked thought about how many minutes guys would get, what makes sense to me on how players will fit together, and how you're going to have to move guys around if this is the 10 to cover not only their maybe traditional position, but covering and gapping, other spots on the court while other guys are getting a break or in foul trouble, stuff like that. So this is really was interesting to me. And we know Arkansas started out with a 9 deep last year. And because of there was injuries when it was Jonas Adu, even Nelly Davis, later it was Boogie Flan, and even much later Adu Thero. You had dynamics, of players that were doing better at certain parts of the season, not as much later, or vice versa. So that impacted their minutes. There's always going to be those kind of dynamics that will impact what my projections are. And you'll be surprised at who gets squeezed out here, based on the idea that Arkansas is actually expanding its rotation from a 9 to 11. Well, right now they're at 10. And I'll just give you a little spoiler alert right now. Right now, I've got the minutes as an 8 deep, not even a 9 deep. Some would argue Arkansas was playing better when it got down to an 8 deep and at times even a 7 deep. And that's part of why I've got these minutes like I do right now, thinking about, can you really have a kumbaya and give a bunch of minutes to a bunch of back end rotation guys? Right now, I'm not seeing it. Again, if the staff decides to add something later, and then we relook and revisit it, but this is just based on the 10 where we sit right now. While we're kind of been put in timeout by the coaching staff for being ratcheting up all the available portal pop prospects. I've been told to pump the brakes on that. Maybe they're pumping the brakes. Maybe they're just moving in darkness and we're going to hear something. It could be a splash. It could be depth. Maybe a combination of both. But for now, let's go 10 deep and let's talk 10 deep. My starting five, I've said this already. I'm going to say it again. I've got Darius Acuff Jr., McDonald's All-American, top 5 rated 5-star, the number 1 point guard in the country, in the starting lineup from day one. He's going to split lead guard duties with DJ Wagner to some degree. But I've got Acuff in the starting lineup. And I could have started with DJ Wagner, but if I've got Acuff at the 1, I'm going to do it positionally 1 through 5. I've got Acuff at the 1, and I've got DJ Wagner at the 2. Third-year player under Calipari. Played his best basketball for Calipari last year as the lead guard once Boogie Flan got hurt. And so you've got a 1-2 combo there at the lead guard. They're both going to have their share of minutes, and the bulk of their minutes will come at the lead guard. So, but they're also going to be on the court some together because I've even got them starting together. I think DJ stays in the starting lineup, and I think Acuff's a day 1 starter. That's where things get a little awkward potentially, or maybe even likely, based on how it was last year when that's how it started. Boogie Fland is a starter. He didn't play himself out of being a starter. He got hurt and was thought to be lost for the season. It's not like he lost his starting job. So Acuff and DJ Wagner bring a lot of question marks, other than I believe there are fewer question marks about both of them starting. I think they will. At least that's how I see the season beginning. At your 1 and 2. So Acuff at the 1, DJ starting at the 2. But I think, again, when we start talking minutes, both of them will end up playing the bulk of their minutes as lead guard. So that's going to be an interesting way how they cut this up. At the 3, it's Carter Knox. I believe Carter is part of the 10. Yes, he's in the NBA draft. Yes, there's a chance he doesn't come back. But this premise is based on Carter Knox being back, and we think that's the most likely scenario anyway. So this premise is on that. Carter Knox starting at the 3. Trevor Brazil at the 4. That seems obvious, especially the way he played at the end of the year. Plus, they don't have a 4. He's a 4-5, but plays mostly at the 4 spot. Other than him in this 10, there isn't a viable 4 as a starter. So it's Trevor Brazil, and it makes sense. I think, going into his, what will be, technically his 5th season of college basketball, 3 at Arkansas, his freshman season at Missouri, all signs point to maybe he's going to have his best year consistently if he can stay healthy. And then at the 5 spot, I've got Malik Ewan, the 6'11" transfer from Florida State. He was a starter at Florida State. When you look at the 2 big men Arkansas had, he's I think the better rebounder, certainly better offensively, not just because of his ability to score once he gets 15 feet and in, but his ability to handle even further out, to get into his shot or to pass and create for others. So that's my starting 5. And when you look at that starting 5, you're loaded. 60% of that group, 3 out of 5, are your main retention pieces, guys that played in prominent roles, players that had prominent roles in how you finished the season, which was your best basketball last year, and gave that team a chance to be a player or 2 away from being an Elite 8 team. Yes, there are some question marks about how all of this fits, even in that starting 5. I mentioned Acuff and Wagner as primary example of how's that going to work exactly when that experiment, when it was Boogie Flynn instead of Acuff last year, was a rough one with both of them on the court together. As you got started on 5 through league play, especially. Either way, this to me is the strongest unit. 60% of it is your retention, and the biggest part of your retention. And you've got going to get obviously your heavy dose of minutes from your starters. That's always the case typically. Not, sometimes you have a 6-man that factors in, but in this case, I think this starting group will be the bulk of the minute getters when we look at everything, because we're going to move into the other parts of this. But let's talk about the minutes for the starters. I've got DJ Wagner. He led the team in minutes a year ago with 34.7. I actually want to see a scenario where you decrease his minutes, get his minutes down a little bit. It may not happen. He was at 34.7 for the season last year. I'm going into this, cutting him down almost 4 minutes. Almost 4 minutes. That's a lot. I may be wrong about this. But getting him to 31 minutes with this group would be what I would like to see. It may not be possible. They may need the steady hand back there. They may need the steady hand. What does DJ bring? Well, he brings a sense of physicality and size in your backcourt. He's a thick 6'3", 6'4". He's not bashful about getting downhill offensively, getting all the way to the basket, getting in close range, runners, floaters, but getting all the way in. No, he's not a guy that's constantly finished above the rim, but, he's not an easy guy to just stay in front of because he's not blowing by people, but he creates some of his finishing angles just because he's, not a lot of people are taking him on physically. He brushes it off and keeps going. So there are elements of that at both ends of the court. I think he's got a chance to be a plus defender in year 3 in college in that backcourt. So 34.7 minutes to 31, that may be wishful thinking, but the way I go through this, I think, maybe he's a little better rested at the end of games too, if his workload comes down just a little bit. I think the other part of that is, whereas you had a Nelly Davis, a veteran guy to play the 2 last year, you may have more question marks and more of a learning curve for Malik Thomas at the 2 coming off the bench. I have him in this scenario coming off the bench. So you say, well, wouldn't that then maybe mean that DJ gets more minutes? I mean, that's just it. That's why I'm not 100% confident this will happen. This is how I would cut it up, though. 31 for DJ. Darius Acuff Jr., I think, again, a day 1 starter. He's the kind of guy that's shown at every level to this point of being a clutch type of guy. Neither he nor Wagner are 3-point shooters. That's just not what they are. That's going to impact how much they're on the court together too. But I've got him tied for the second most minutes at 30 right now, just going into it. I see this guy, maybe it's more like 27 or 28 when reality sets in. But at the end of the day, I've got him as a 30-minute guy. especially as he gets into SEC play, calibrates, gets to a point where, uh, you know, uh, you're really relying on him. I see this guy as the potential to lead your team in scoring, Darius Acuff Jr. And to do that, you got to play. You could play 27, 28 minutes and still have scoring volume. A lot of question marks, not only with his 3-point shooting, but his defense. That's another question mark with the minutes. Can you keep him out there that long and not suffer too much on one end while you're getting some at the other? I don't have I don't have lack of confidence in his ability to facilitate or to make the right decisions and not just be about him and getting his shots up. So 30 minutes feels right for me. I think another 30-minute guy, I think we're going to potentially see when we talk Carter Knox at the three, expanding his game, expanding his role. Based on these 10, I think he's going to have to do more than just be your lead guy at the wing. And good minutes at the three spot from Billy Richmond third. The fourth piece coming off the bench and your retention. And a guy that really came on strong at the end of the season, maybe not at the level Carter Knox did, but at a strong level. So Carter now can maybe help disperse some of those 3-4 small ball 4 minutes that Adu Thero was getting when Trevor and Brazil's not on the court. But I've got Carter Knox going from 24 minutes a game. That increased late in the year for him, and I now am going to say he'll be the other 30 minutes per game guy. So I've got three in the 30-minute range. I've got DJ with less minutes at 31, and I've got Acuff and Carter Knox at 30 apiece. And I see both Acuff and Carter Knox as all league potential. We're going to talk more about the all league stuff as I try to bracket where I could see that more specifically for each guy. But this is helping explain also why I see these minutes like I do. Trevor in Brazil at the 4, he was 20.9 minutes per game last year. Obviously, that's skewed by a heavy dose of him at the end of the year, and you were down to 7. You didn't have whole lot of options. But again, you don't have a whole lot of options at the 4 now. So, but because he does tend to get in foul trouble, he does have a history of when he has injuries not playing as much, and even or maybe if he's got some bumps and bruises in game, he doesn't play as many minutes. But I'm still jumping him. I'm going to jump him from 21 minutes, 20.9 minutes, up to 26. I'm going to jump him to 26. So I also think Trevin has all league potential. I do. And he's going to help some at the 5. But you've got two really good 1-2 punch there already. You don't have the same issue you had when you had to roll with Big Z at the 5. Just so much inconsistency with him game to game, and especially lacking physicality and the ability to rebound. You don't have that at the 5 spot this time around with Ewan and Pringle, which may mean we see less of Trevin at the 5 and more at the 4. Nonetheless, we will see him some in that spot for matchup small ball lineups. If there's an injury, this is a thin front line and we're back to square one, so we can't assume that Pringle and Ewan both will be healthy every game. So 26 minutes. I've got Trevin at 26. Malik Ewan, over 26 minutes per game last year at Florida State. I've actually got him initially going down just a little bit. I've got him at 25 minutes. I think Nick Pringle, because you've got a starter value guy coming off the bench, and I don't know what Florida State had in that regard, but because you've got a guy that brings physicality, and because he's got SEC experience, and maybe some qualities that you don't want to have a big reduction in what he was doing for South Carolina in terms of playing time. There's going to be some reduction, probably the biggest jump in reduction in minutes because he's not the starter, but you still got to get him on the court. So I'm going to go 25 minutes for Malik Ewan. Again, he was over 26 per game last year at Florida State. That's subject to change, but these are not proven commodities at Arkansas any more than Darius Acuff is either. But these are this is still Ewan in my mind among your top 5 minute getters. So I can adjust that. He could end up being a 28 to 30 minute per game guy as we learn more. But right now, that's what I've got it slotted at, 25 minutes for Ewan. I also see him as all league potential. Now, I've said all this before about these guys that have all league potential. Darius Acuff Jr. coming in, Carter Knox, Trevor Brazil, Malik Ewan. I'm also going to include DJ Wagner now. I think there's a shot for him to be on the all defensive team. There's a chance for that. He's improved statistically, even though it's incremental from his freshman to sophomore season. It's not enough to say, oh, he's made a big step and now it's time for the next big step. But let's say he makes a bigger step in production going from year 2 to 3 than he did even going from 1 to 2. If that happens, and along with him, let's say that he's the anchor and the top minute guy again on a team that doesn't struggle for as long as it did, and does better once league play starts, and ends up having a good season in this SEC, because Arkansas is going to have one of the most veteran teams in the league, including the retention part of it, which may be the biggest thing when you look at guys that had big impacts last year. So there may be a pathway for him to be a third team all SEC kind of guy or all defensive team. I don't think Arkansas is going to place 5 guys as all SEC. What I'm saying is, I think in each one of these starters, you can make a case. You can make a real case. Last year, coming in with all league guys that were proven going deep in the tournament, when you looked at Jonas Adu and Nelly Davis, both of those got preseason all SEC love. And then they dealt with everything they dealt with, and that was never reality. But it was 2 other guys that we maybe wouldn't have predicted. Adu Thero and Boogie Fland as a freshman. Well, I think there's enough on Acuff to maybe go ahead and project that at minimum all freshman team, but potentially a 1 through 3. But maybe DJ Wagner is the Adu Thero in terms of a bigger jump in production, efficiency, maybe in areas that helps Arkansas, maybe even defensively. Maybe he can get there. Even though Thero ended up not making all league, part of that's probably because he didn't play the last 4 games. And Arkansas didn't have, they had to have a strong finish just to get to 8-10 and finish 9th in the league in a league that was just loaded. I don't think the league will be as loaded, and it may make the path even easier for some of these fringe guys, if you want to look at Wagner as a fringe guy, to maybe make all league. All right, so I've gone through the starting 5. We're 7 minutes in. I've given you the minutes on those guys, 31, 30, 30. Those are the Wagner, Acuff, and Knox. That's 61 minutes when you add it up. Trevor Brazile, I've earmarked right now for 26 minutes. 61 plus 26 is 87. Malik Ewan, I've got at 25. That's 112 minutes between that group, if my math is right. 51 plus 61 is 112 minutes. So just adding that up in my head, you've got in a 200-minute game, or excuse me, 91, not 61, 91. See, I already screwed up. 91 and 51 is 142 minutes. So in a 200-minute game, you've got 58 minutes to spare with the rest of your 5. You've got 5 more to go. And I'm only going to give these minutes right now to 3 players. I'm going Billy Richmond III. He played 17 and a half minutes per game last year. I'm bumping him up to 20. I've got Malik Thomas, the 5-star top 10 rated guard off the bench. I think at the end of the day, he's a guy that can end up averaging 20. And I've got Nick Pringle, who very well can end up getting 20 minutes per game, but I've got him at 18 right now. So there's your other 48 minutes. You had 162, 58 minutes. You had 142 minutes, with your starters, and you've got now 58, 20, 20, and 18. So Billy Richmond III, I still see him as a guy, because he's part of your retention, because he had so much success late in the year. I see him, boy, I really screwed all the math up on that, trying to add it all up. But I really see him not only increasing his minutes, but he could be a guy that ends up being a 24-minute per game guy. That's probably a ceiling for him based on how things play out with others. But 20 is safe for me to say for now, going up from 17 and a half. I think Malik Thomas could be a guy, depending upon his learning curve and what he's able to, come in and, grasp the system, not take bad shots. It could be a guy that, even if he starts out 14 to 16 minutes per game, at the end of the day, I think we'll end up at 20 when we look at the totality of the season, most likely. And because he's the only guy, when we look at all the deficiencies in this 10, it's 3-point shooting. He's the only volume shooter at a good percentage. Yeah, it's the high school level, but when you look at everybody else, whether they're transferring in, the big men, they don't shoot threes. That's who's transferred in. Your retention, Carter Knox got better. Trevor Brazile's, good there relative to his position, but not on a high volume. This is a guy at least on a high volume at 38% at Overtime Elite, over 8 takes per game. There may be a scenario where he comes in just hits the ground running and knocking down threes, and it makes all the difference in the world. And we're not talking about 20 minutes per game. We're talking about 24 to 28. So you never know about Malik Thomas, but that's just me trying to guess at it right now. Pringle, as a starter last year, played 24 minutes, 24 and a half minutes at South Carolina. Coming in with whatever agreement they have with him and Ewan looks like the starter to me. And I think we have to look at Pringle right now as an 18-minute per game guy. There'll be some games where he'd play more than that. I don't know how many games he'll play less than that due to foul trouble or stuff not working. Right now, I've got him slotted at 18. So that takes up all 200 minutes. That takes up all 200. 58 off the bench and 3 players. You've got an 8 deep here. You say, well, how did you expand your roster? Well, again, you went from 9 to 10 with Artal and Seeley. And right now, based on the qualities and value of the guys I just mentioned and the experience, I just don't see the minutes for those guys right now. But they're there. You've got 10 players instead of 9 total. Even if you disperse the minutes differently, you still got 2 guys that can play. They're good enough. They're not like the extras from last year who, when you got down to 7, you just couldn't play them. These guys will. It wouldn't surprise me at all if there are games where Artal's coming off the bench because of foul trouble, injury, illness, and giving Arkansas 6 to 10 minutes per game. But I can't project that going into it, not based on the way I look at this. And some of these guys, their minutes won't be exactly like this. They'll be a little different. There may be some reductions for some where you could, you'd see, let's say Artal out of 31 regular season games plays half or more of those. That means somebody's hurt, got in foul trouble. Some of their minutes were impacted here and there, and he gets some minutes. I can't specifically shoehorn him in and say, look, he's going to definitely play 6 minutes per game or 4 or 10 or 8. I just don't see it. Seeley, I see even less of how that works because Arkansas is loaded 1 through 3. They got a lot of depth there. Artal could help you in some of those small ball 4 minutes, but I think Carter Knox is going to get a lot of those. And I think we're going to see a few minutes, 4 to 5 minutes a game, where Ewan and Pringle will be on the court together when Brazil's out. And so, as a 3-4 guy, mostly filling in at the 4, and you're 2 deep with retention at the 3 with Knox and Billy Richmond III, I just don't see how you're subtracting some of their minutes to make sure you get Artal in there. But I do see Artal and Seeley as being guys that will probably play or are playable due to attrition and injuries. And so just like Boogie Fland averaged 31 minutes a game, well, he didn't play 15 games. So someone's got to play minutes in the games if you have extended injuries. That's why the averages could work out. But if guys don't play every single game, some of these depth pieces who you didn't have outside of your top 9 last year, but this year you've got 2 who could come in and play and help fill a void there. They might not get a ton of minutes, but they're usable. And so you say, so my thought is, even if you don't have a top 9 that are getting, everyone's getting at least 13 or 14 minutes, if 8 are spreading out the bulk of the minutes, that's okay, because in a need, I think these 2 can play, whereas you didn't have guys outside the top 9 last year that could. It's also the reason why I think you're 1 injury away on the front line from being in the same predicament you were last year, and it's why I think Arkansas probably will add another frontline piece, if it's a 4 or even a 3rd center, something like that. And another shooter. When we look at all of this, there just isn't shooting that's reliable. When you say we need to get better as a 3-point shooting team, by percentage, you lost your top 3 guys, Flan, Nelly Davis, and Big Z. Now, Big Z wasn't playing at the end of the year. Nelly Davis had gotten better. Flan was not really shooting as much when he came back after the NCAA tournament. He wasn't shooting as well once SEC play started. Guys like Carter Knox really picked it up. We've talked about those percentages. 43.5% spanning the last 18 games. That was half your season. 20 of 46. It's not the highest of volume, but it was consistent. If you could get somewhere from where he finished the season at 35%, somewhere in between that and the 43.5, that puts you at 39% or somewhere like that. Can he be that good consistently all year? Shooters, even when they're shooting 39 to 40%, They'll have games where they're down in the, low 30s or mid 30s, and some others where they're spiking and they're above 40. And then what your overall percentage is factors all that in. Could he be a guy that could get to 38, 39% on a season? Trevor Brazile, the last 9 games when he really blew up and averaged 11.3 points and over 9 rebounds per game, he had multiple games making 2 or 3 threes each game in that run. And through that whole 9 games, it was a 39% shooting for him from distance. And he's a career 36%. So you'll take that at the 4 spot. This is why a guy like Malik Thomas on the court with Brazile and Knox and either Wagner or Acuff looks very attractive, because we know neither of the big men are 3-point shooters. So whichever one of them's on the court, Ewan or Pringle. But that's why the Malik Thomas minutes at 20, if he catches on and he's one of Arkansas's best 3-point shooters, we're likely to see more minutes from him. And you like some of these lineups where you've got him and Knox and Brazile, assuming that Knox and Brazile are able to, keep on keeping on how they finished. And because retention mattered so much, and because you pump the brakes and saying, we're not in a hurry, this thing's has got to make sense for us to add anybody. We'll see what they do. And you hope they do add someone that can help stretch the floor, help improve the 3-point shooting. But for now, since we're talking about just this group, I can't wait to see Thomas, Knox, and Brazile on the court together. And they played the 2, 3, and 4, so you don't have a problem there. In terms of, you're forcing guys that are similar positionally out there just because maybe they're your best 3-point shooting options. But that wouldn't even be the case. They would fit like a glove in terms of their positional value. So we may see a lot of that. I'm interested to see how much of a playmaker Ewan can be in 2-man game and dribble handoff scenarios. Or just ISOing him. You don't have to throw it into the low post to him. You can let him get the ball out on the wing and back in, or free throw line extended. In the dribble handoff game, he doesn't have to hand off. Remember, there were times Arkansas tried to run dribble handoff with Big Z and Jonas Adu. And with Z, some of the design was you wanted him to pass. He was a pretty good passer. But the problem was he had so many problems, you just really couldn't keep him on the floor as we got closer to the end of the season when Arkansas had to win games because of the defensive stuff and some of the other problems to really maximize that. And Adu, you saw what happened to him when he couldn't execute the dribble handoff. He sometimes was stuck on an island and he tried to dribble and get closer to making the next pass, and the ball would get away from him, or defenders would gobble it up. Ewan's that's going to be hard to do because of how well he handles it and passes out of that. So some of these players that we're talking about, I can make cases why they might be all league type of guys. Malik Thomas, if his role is more than 20 minutes, or even if it's only 20 minutes, if he's a double-digit scorer and a prolific 3-point shooter, he might be, someone that makes an all-freshman team in this league. And this is again why when the staff says they're happy about this roster, they got a lot of all-league potential guys. I went through some of the reasons why with multiple of them. I don't think Arkansas would have more than 2, maybe 3, most likely. If they win the SEC, you might see some combination of all defensive team, all freshman team, and 1 or 2 on one of the 3 all league teams. Maybe some combination that gets them to 3 if they won the SEC. So when we throw out some 5 or 6 guys have some kind of all league potential, it doesn't mean we're saying that Arkansas will get that many. If everything goes well and they win the league, they're probably not going to have by combination more than 3. That's just my take on it. But it does explain again why the staff's not jumpy about making big additions. Let's go back to Jimmy Watkins. That's the one guy outside of Haggerty, which seems so unrealistic. Chad Baker-Mazara, who we were told, shut that down. Watkins is the one guy that's hanging out for the NBA draft. But look, even as a 3-4, the best case you can make is he starts at the 4, Brazile comes off the bench. But does this knock heads with the kind of role that Carter Knox brings? Do you pursue him at some point anyway, because you might not get Knox back? So we're not trying to say that these 10 are the final pieces. We're just talking about what if it landed that way? What if it does play out that way? This is what we're looking at. This is how I see the minutes. I don't have minutes right now for Artel and Sealy, although I think for all the attrition things we've seen with Arkansas, they probably would find some time. If Sealy plays in a certain amount of games and it's limited, just maybe some in non-conference and it's a certain percentage, he'll be able to get that season back. Or maybe we don't see him. Artel, I think, is the one that's most likely based on this roster structure. But again, I'm just not seeing how you squeeze time away from other guys. I think it's mostly an element of where are we going to need him because of foul trouble, illness, and injuries that are keeping players from playing. But I do see him as probably the most likely guy that's going to get minutes when you're comparing it to Sealy because of the depth in the backcourt and the wings, and because, again, you're still thin on that front line. But I just can't project even 2 minutes of playing time for him on a consistent basis. I think it's going to be based on need and not based on he's in the rotation. Now, I could be wrong about that. But if he's in the rotation, how many minutes is that? What does it look like? And who are you pulling minutes away to do that, from to do that? So, again, that's where I'm at with it. 31 minutes in, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We kind of looked at everything here. Went through who I think the starters are, went through those minutes first, talked about the all-league stuff, went through the main three off the bench. I think the way I see it now, this is a heavy, as just this 10, without bringing anybody else in, which I do believe they end up will, but just focus on these 10. I think it's a heavy 8-deep rotation, where right now I don't even have a minutes projection for the last two in the 10. But until next time, if something breaks, we'll come back on. I'll probably come back on tomorrow and go position groups next and look at it a little bit more closely based on, just positionally and not the broader, thing that we did today. But until then, thanks for being here. We'll see you soon.